What's up, everyone? Welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar. I'm going to use my late night DJ voice because I'm actually in an airport lounge right now, so I don't want someone to pour coffee on my head or something because I'm being too loud, although it would be fun. But super excited to spend the next 45 minutes to an hour with you. I know we all lead very busy lives, so appreciate you taking the time to learn and chalk it up with us today. So I'm excited for multiple reasons. I've got two amazing guests with me today, and I also love this topic. I posted about it on LinkedIn. It kind of blew up. People want to hear this topic, and I like it because it's like kind of an unsexy topic, but it really needs to be talked about, and we need to get people thinking about sales data, why it's important to their org. And so that's the title, is Digital Sales Data, the real secret to moving deals from prospect to closed. And before I introduce my guest, super quick housekeeping. So we record all of these things. I always get at least 10 to 15 emails of people being like, hey, where's the recording? Where's the recording? It takes us about 24 hours. We'll get it out to you for sure. And then secondly, these are for the community, right? So we're going to take this conversation where we go, but we want you to be in the driver's seat. So jump in the Q&A. It's at the bottom there. Introduce yourself, your name, your company, why you chose to hang out with us today, and any questions that are relevant. We'll definitely get to as we go. This will be a Q&A style roundtable discussion, so we want to get you involved for sure. All right. Got that out of my way. I want to introduce my guests. I am joined by both Chris Hartwigson and Jake Dunlap. Chris and Jake, welcome, gentlemen.
Hello, hello.
What's going on, man? Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to chalk it up with you both. So, as always, like to add a little bit more color to your background. So, Chris, I'll start with you. Chris is the founder and CEO of Dooley. And those of you, if you haven't heard of Dooley or haven't checked them out yet, Chris and I have had a lot of discussions on this, and it's kind of like if Evernote, Salesforce, Excel, and then like your sales playbook had a grandkid, they'd wish it looked something like Dooley. So definitely check them out. They actually have a new outreach integration as well, which is really cool. That'll be live in our Outreach Galaxy very shortly. And prior to Dooley, Chris actually ran international sales for Vision Critical. I know they're a huge company in Vancouver, big global company, and you actually took it from startup stage to about 100 million in ARR, which is insane. And you got to work with clients like the NFL, the BBC, and some other heavy hitters. So we got the right man to talk about this. Chris, I'm excited, man. And then moving on, we have Jake Dunlap. You probably know Jake unless you've never flicked on LinkedIn ever. He's sales thought leader, puts out amazing content, and he's the CEO, of course, of Scaled Consulting and Scaled Media, which is a management consulting firm. And we were talking earlier, and you're really excited right now, Jake, about talking about your newly launched agency, which is actually going to be dedicated to professional brand and creative services, both for high-profile individuals and sales orgs. So that's a new thing that Scale's doing, which is really cool. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Is it basically kind of taking your model of how you blew up on LinkedIn and trying to replicate it for other?
Well, I'm still trying to blow up, man. Let's not get too excited. We're at step zero. I think a lot of it is, I think what we're seeing right now is that LinkedIn is starting to behave a lot like Instagram did in 2014, 2015. And I think what we're seeing is that if you think about the noise factor about email calls, et cetera, and you look at LinkedIn as kind of a very specific way for you to cut through the noise, I think more and more companies are going to start to think about this concept of professional brand, not being people just wanting to brag or to be an influencer, but really as a way to differentiate as a company. Right? Most B2B brands right now are fairly cookie cutter. I won best places to work. I release ebooks, and that's kind of their social strategy. Right. And my employee of the week, look at me, I'm a good CEO because I got my hand around somebody. That's not that's interesting for employment. That's not, it doesn't mean I want to do business with you. And so we really feel that the concept of professional brand is going to be in 2020 and beyond a really important topic for everyone to pay attention to. And so we've hired 2 full-time people from the reputation management, social media management world, and we're pumped.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with that. And that's maybe for another webinar. I'd love to dive into that because we share
100%.
a lot of the same viewpoints on that. It's like Instagram 2014, except you don't have to take your clothes off. You can just,
and there's no trolls. Like, it's so safe. Like, it's like nobody's there.
Yeah.
Like, idiot.
Right. Totally. Yeah. Anyway, we got sidetracked, but you were also the previously VP of sales at Glassdoor. Obviously, they're blown up, huge company, and several other rapid growth and large tech companies. So pumped. We got the right people in the room to have a great discussion. So here's where I want to kind of kick it off with, because I can do a bit of a bio, but I don't feel like I do anyone justice when I do it. And you both have been in sales for a long time, specifically technology sales. So I want to start, and Chris, I'll start with you. Just tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are. I think a lot of salespeople strive to, one day maybe be a CEO, start their own company. How did you get there?
I'll do it. How did I get here? So I started off in tech. I had a real passion for tech right through university onward. And we were actually laughing in the green room before we opened this up to everybody about some of our early war stories in tech. As my career progressed, it was pretty obvious that SaaS was going to be a big thing. And so I jumped into the SaaS world with Vision Critical, and opened up our Australia office, opened up our UK office. The one thing I realized as I was going through that process of building myself out and becoming, a salesperson first and then a sales leader next, was nobody ever stops you in the hallway when you're exceeding quota to ask you, how's the CRM looking? They want to stop you to high five you. And when I thought about sort of my own personal behavior and how I operated, it was pretty different from how others might operate. But then as you start to run teams, you start to see, the spectrum of performance across your team. So you start to get really interested in how you can optimize people's lives and make them more productive sellers themselves. So anyway, that's sort of the genesis behind why we started Dooley, or why I started Dooley after 9 years at Vision Critical, three countries, and having kids along the way in tow between Australia and London, all sorts of crazy stories, to where we are now. It's been a really fun ride.
Awesome. That's awesome. And Jake, I'll do same question to you. How did you end up, starting Scaled Consulting, and why do you think that this topic now is an important one to discuss?
Yeah, I mean, I started the company now. It's been almost 6.5 years. So it's kind of wild to think about. So, look, as I was a VP of sales at a few different companies, I saw that there's consistent challenges that change pretty rapidly as you're going through different phases of scaling. When you go from 20 reps to 100, there's a whole slew of other things that break. When you go from 100 to 1,000 or even 500, there's other things that break. And a VP of sales is a very island job, meaning marketing is over here. They get agencies and PR agencies and creative agencies. A salesperson gets a sales trainer. And really just saw there's this opportunity to support sales leaders as they're going through various stages of scaling. And now, we're working with big enterprise companies that are trying to modernize. And, for me, I realized that I was much better as a consultant as opposed to an employee. I never thought of being an entrepreneur. I was going to start my own company, but I love sales. I'm passionate about sales. I love sales leadership. I love change management. I love all of the things that go into consulting, which is like, consulting is like the gross business on top of tech, professional services, but it's what I love. And so, we've grown really rapidly over the last few years. We've got about 31 people now between New York and Austin and remote. So just helping companies with a variety of sales and marketing challenges. And it's a lot of fun.
That's great.
And big fans of what Chris is doing at Dooley too. They're one of our partners, along with the folks at Outreach, and that goes back. You did ask me a question. I'll answer it on the topic, which is, to me, data is the thing we don't talk about. Which is, we always want to talk about closing more deals. We want to talk about the pipeline, et cetera, but we don't realize the impact that data has on our ability to close or not close. Instead, because we're sales, we're sales. Like, we want to do stuff, right? Data, and the other problem is, like Salesforce UI is that, I mean, it's better now, but that's what we've grown up on, right, for the last 10 years. And so hasn't been easy to enter data or even to augment data, using, Discover.org or Lead Genius or somebody. But so why I'm passionate about this topic is I think it's a topic that more and more teams need to wake up to, because the opportunity of what it can mean, both early stages of the funnel and middle stages, and then for your customer as you're transitioning from sales to account management is just massive for the buyer experience in particular.
Yeah, I would agree. And you said a few things there that kind of picked up on. And one is, I remember always thinking it was so weird when I first got into tech that marketing used all these freelancers and had all these different avenues, and they'd outsource creative work, and they'd have a brand person, and sales would just be sitting there like, all right, we're going to do another team huddle and like try and motivate each other. So I thought that was interesting. And we're seeing a shift now with some of these, outsourced SDR shops, of course, with what you're doing. And then, this data piece is, I think we're seeing it now in the results. When I look at and when I talk to a lot of organizations, which I'm lucky enough to do, I find that a lot of the top performers are no longer those action-oriented cowboys. It's the data-driven sales leader who is crunching the numbers and making sure that their data is accurate so they can accurately forecast, predict, and find that next best action is what I think it kind of comes down to. So let's set the tone then. What is broken in your eyes, Chris, in the world of sales data?
Yeah, that's a really big question to unpack, but I think the primary thing that I always think about is this idea that we think we have a data problem that is kind of small, but it's beyond scope for most companies. One of the biggest problems is that we have this problem with our supply chain of information. There's so many broken hops along the way within an organization for information to get distributed. We're implementing things like Slack and whatnot to try to expedite the movement of information around the organization and to get people involved in deals. But there's so many tools, and a lot of people have very little visibility into the tools across the business, a lot of personal tools and things like that kind of sneak in. That's one area that I get really fascinated by is how do you streamline that supply chain? So it's almost like you have the vacuum tubes that are in the Costco where you're putting the money in the machine and it flies in the back room, and then something else flies back to you, making change. Aging and curation of information, the ongoing joke on CMS platforms and with Salesforce in particular, or sorry, I shouldn't say Salesforce, CRM in particular, is it's where content and data go to die. It doesn't stay live. It doesn't go into motion. It doesn't do anything. And there's a lot of challenges that are being built out of that around inaccuracy, partial answers being given to satisfy leadership, as opposed to giving them the whole picture, because frankly, there's a bigger problem with sales. They're trying to do their job. So that's one thing that I think about a lot. The other thing I really think about is reporting and forecasting. And this is something I really don't get this. Everyone has this really big obsession to have forecast accuracy. And for most of us, it's actually more art than science, because I know for damn sure that you need really good data in order to properly forecast deals. And if your data is all over the place and it's old and it's inconsistent and it's inaccurate, then we're doing this, right? And that art is getting better, largely because the reps actually have the data. They're just not distributing it very well. So we're making all these multi-million-dollar decisions based on incomplete data every day. And somehow, because it's based on a report that's living in Salesforce, we make ourselves feel good about that report just because it's there. It's not good. It's actually really broken. So I can go on about a number of different things, but the last part I want to really drill in on is there are lots of other types of sales data that we need to really start thinking about. One that is top of mind for me, usage of time. How is time being used? That's a data point, and we're not really thinking about that all that often. What the relevance of content that we're sharing with our team? How do we know it's relevant? And I mean, there's been this big dawn of the sales enablement leader, which is awesome, and it's starting to help us to understand relevance and quality of content. What about efficacy of the content? How is it helping to drive a conversation forward? And what about timeliness of response? And what about buyer engagement? Not just to your emails. I think that problem has been long solved by the folks like Outreach and the like. But what about buyer engagement with the rep? How are we measuring that? How are we understanding that? And that's all. It's all a result of unpacking your data better.
Yeah, you totally agree. And you mentioned something there about time management, and it makes me think. I was just giving a talk earlier today, and someone brought up the recent CSO Insights report and it said that sellers are only spending 39% of their time actually selling, which is a pretty shocking stat around that. And how can we shift that? And if we care about data, how can we make this not another thing on their plate that takes them away from selling? Jake, I'll do a similar question. We actually have a great question from the community, and it's similar. And it's, what can you do from within your organization, and then brackets non-management, so a non-management position, to improve sales data governance?
All right, we're going to see. I told you my mic was a lot of fun today. So what we're going to do, I think, I love this question. And by the way, everyone on the webinar, please, feel free to ask more questions in here, and be super selfish about it, right? Like, Chris and I aren't here to just talk about a topic. Get in here like Michael and ask more questions, because all of you are trying to think great, I'm going to spend another half hour listening to these guys. So ask more questions, be selfish. I think that this is a great one. Look, I'm just going to tell a story about myself and something I did. I guess it was intuitive. I don't know why I did it. The data is for you too. It's not just, I think the problem is salespeople tend to think the data is for their boss only. It's not, it's for you. How many reps every year are doing, or every quarter are doing, their own close loss analysis on their own deals? What about best times of day when you booked appointments, times when your deals close, biggest deals? You got to run your own business. And something that I did really early, again, I guess it was somewhat intuitive, I don't know. But what I did as a rep, I worked, my first job out of college was with the Tampa Bay Rays, right? We're the worst team in Major League Baseball. But we got inbound leads. It was not a lot of them, as you can imagine. Going into year 2, I did a scatter plot. I used my Missouri State Excel skills, and I timed every single time an inbound lead came in, and our inbound phones were on a loop. So if you were on the phone, it would skip you and go to the next person. So I found these pockets during the day. I did this all myself. I didn't need a boss to tell me. My boss wasn't complaining. I found these pockets during the day when nobody called in. It's like that period when people work really hard right before lunch, and that 2 o'clock period. So what I did, I sat there. I literally just sat there like this. Let everyone make cold calls, and I'd be like, Tampa Bay Rays, Tampa Bay Rays, Tampa Bay Rays. And after 2 weeks, people were like, I hate, Jake is cheating. I'm like, you see that I'm not calling. You are choosing to make calls. You're choosing to ignore data. So for me, forget what your manager needs, your forecast data. Forget all of that. Be selfish. Because for me, if I was a frontline rep and I was just starting my career, every quarter I would be doing a win-loss analysis of, the leads that I had, what happened, when did they come in, what worked, what didn't work, why did this deal close? I'm not waiting for some sales ops team to give it to me. Now they ended up like week 3 of this, they fixed the system, but I've never really, I'm looking at data for myself. Because I want to find the ways to do it. I'm running reports on people's territories where accounts have no activity. I'm trying to find the ways to get there outside of just doing my job. So I think that the most important thing that you can do, Michael, is you can be selfish and think about, if you had data, what could you do with that data? If you know why you closed deals, why you lost deals, don't wait for your boss to tell you. You can go and find that data yourself.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Jake's saying. One of the things that I did pretty early in my career is try to figure out not what the company's ICP was, ideal customer, but what was mine. Where did I excel? Where did I shine? And really map to that and double and triple down on that. Because once you start to get that narrative right for the thing that you're really good about and really passionate about, it's replicable, right? So you mentioned that I signed the NFL when I was at Vision Critical. I first signed the National Hockey League, go Canada. Then I signed Major League Baseball. Then I signed the NBA. Then I signed the NFL. Then we got into NASCAR, and it just went on and on because it was something I was super passionate about. I could tell the story over and over again, and it became really easy. So don't fight the path of most resistance to get to your number.
And that's what inbound lead routing is going to look like. I think Yelp actually has built some homegrown system that analyzes closed loss. like for their reps. And that's how we're gonna do inbound lead routing in the future is exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah,
I'm going to give mapping to the rep, not because he's in Oklahoma, but because Johnny is better at closing these leads. You know, like.
Yeah. Great points. And I love that. And I love how you said you closed the NBA, and now it's official that Canadians are better at basketball. It's the one time where there's two Canadians and one American, like ever, that has ever happened. So
yeah, I think there's a paradox right now because the U.S. owns the Stanley Cup and Canada owns
the Blues.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of weird. All right. So Jake, I love what you did with the community because we have a massive influx of questions right now. So that's great, and we asked for it, so we got to go. All right. So Brandy DeWild says, "This is a selfish question." She prefaces it. Recently went, so it's very, very pointed. Recently went on a sales interview and was asked to provide proof of sales that she has done. My employers unquestionably consider such information proprietary. How can I provide what is requested and maintain the integrity of my employer relationship? Who wants to tackle that one? Chris, you want to tackle that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I want to make
my quick take is I would just blur out the company names. Like,
yeah.
I think what they really care about is I would just blur out the company names. And if you do that, then like you're not really sharing anything proprietary. If you're sharing like, here is my goal, here's how much I closed, here is my average deal size, here's proof of that, like there's nothing proprietary. Like, or you just go get out your old pen and paper and you just write it out yourself, but it's up to you.
Yeah, I think that honestly what they're looking for is probably more of your system than like how did you get from A to B or from start to close than they are the actual deal. Like that, unless you're going into a named account and they want to know that you have a relationship with Nike, that's obviously different. But for the majority of employers, like when I'm looking at a candidate for the business, I'm looking at acumen, I'm looking at understanding, I'm looking at how they can deliver results and what their mental process is to get from point A to point B. I don't necessarily need the company name to get there. So I would say again, yeah, like Jake said, obfuscate the name. But the other thing I'll say as a cautionary tale is be really careful to identify things that you truly had ownership over, right? As opposed to, something where the team sold the deal. Talk about what your individual contribution was along the way. That's what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Agreed. It's just like in, math class in high school where they're like, we actually just want to see how you got the answer. The answer itself, like sometimes doesn't matter as much. They want to see your thought process to getting that and to closing that deal. All right. Another great question, which really kind of gets to the root of, I think, why a lot of people have joined this webinar. So Michael, thanks for the question. He goes, you guys may have answered this question, but how do you get sales reps that have issues with filling in data in Salesforce? Our sales reps have expressed that they don't want to feel like data entry clerks. So I guess how do you make them enter that data that will help them without making them feel like they're entering data all day?
Yeah, I'm happy to take a swipe at this one. I personally don't want any data entry clerks anywhere at any point in time. That's sort of the mission of our company more broadly. But I would say that the thing that is really important in any role is to understand purpose, right? So I have engineers. They need to understand how our business operates, why our business is what it is. And so you try to create purpose in role. What's the purpose of your data is a really important part of that. If you're not telling your reps why the data is important, guess what? They're never putting it in. The only reason they'll put in data into the CRM or elsewhere is if it's a mechanism to get them paid, right? At the end of the day, this was said really well. Actually, I was in a session last week while I was traveling, said really well by one of the speakers there. Anything that takes away from quota attainment is a misalignment of the effort of the salesperson. So think about why you're asking people to put data in the system. There's all these great methodologies that are going right now. There's MEDDIC, MEDPIC, all sorts of different variations of that. And with that, the sales operations people are like, brilliant, let's put in more fields in CRM. And now it's like, okay, well, I got to pack that one in. I got to pack that one in. I got to pack that one in. 65% of a salesperson's time is spent not selling. Do you really want that, or do you really want your person selling? So understanding the importance is one thing, and doing something with the friggin' data is also really important, because I can do Medic in a notebook. I don't need to put it in the CRM to do anything with it. I can just write it down, and it'll serve my purposes just fine. I'm adhering to a methodology, and I'm doing a great job of adhering to that methodology, and I'm performing reasonably well. The rest of the business might go, okay, well, I don't know who our economic decision makers are. I don't know what the metrics are for success anymore, because nobody puts that stuff in. Again, reciprocate with good value information coming back to the rep, what you're doing, when you're doing it. And I would say the other thing that's really important is the timeliness of it. There is this big latency factor between when I put something in the CRM, competitor, you name it, and when the CRM does something back to me, or when my manager does something back to me. And if you can pack that time down to next to nothing, well, it's cause and effect. You know, there's an instant reward, instant gratification. There's your endorphin hit. I put the information in and it did something back to me. So there's something really important there as well. I want to stress one other thing just on the topic of the data problem as well. It's sort of related to this. When you go into a meeting with your manager expects you to be hyper prepared for that meeting. I want you to tell me all about your deals, and you do like an unpacking of your deals, and maybe you have like a 20 or 30-minute session with your manager. The first 15 minutes is usually discovery of tell me what's going on in your deal. If your manager comes unprepared to the meeting from the very beginning with the knowledge of what's happening in your deal, that's on them. You should be spending that time coaching your team, not finding out what your team's been up to. Anyway, I'll get off my pulpit for a second there. Jake?
I love it. Jake, do you have anything to add there?
No, I think that's a good summary. I mean, you know, the thing I'd add to that quote is I think we also have to remember, like, if it's not in quota attainment or making customers happy, you know, then we shouldn't do it. That's also an important thing. Like, it's maybe okay that we're just being nice to people. But I don't.
Which ultimately falls back into quota attainment, because if you're nice to people, it's gonna bubble and percolate, right?
Or unless you're the relationship builder who's just nice and with no backbone. So I don't really have anything. I think Chris summarized it well. I mean, to me, we have to understand that there's a balance, that as we're giving all these tools, and a lot of people on here are talking about tech stack. As we're given all these tools, the answer isn't always efficiency. It's always optimizing for effectiveness. And I think the issue what Chris is highlighting is that we are optimizing for efficiency, which is coming to the detriment of quota and quota attainment too, actually, and buyer experience. So I think when you're implementing these tools and thinking about these rules, and you're thinking about your end user's experience, it's, can my reps be effective, and making sure that you're building the CRM or, you know, using Dooley, you know, to help to get that data in there so they can be more effective versus just efficient machines.
Yeah. So what would be your definition of efficiency versus effectiveness?
Well, hopefully they're not at odds all the time. I think, look, is it more efficient for me more efficient for my organization if I go in manually and log all my activities, for them to be able to forecast? Like, or if I automate, this is a better one. I create a sequence of 17 steps, and it's more efficient for me to click send all, or do like custom object first name. And like, I'm this much effective. But if I instead did this much more personalization, I could be this much more effective, right? Like, I think outreach is the poster child for this. And so for me, and some of this data entry is also, you know, I think relevant, because it's about, am I getting the right information? Not that I capture like all the information, so my forecast could potentially be more accurate, but I think it's maybe a little more applicable on like outreach.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so efficiency and effectiveness are directly correlated, right? So if you take efficiency, you put on one axis, you take effectiveness, you put on the other, that line that goes up the middle is productivity, right? So you're trying to make people more productive. That means that the things that they're saying are the right things, and they're saying them in a timely manner, and they're doing those things in a timely manner, and being able to execute on their sales plan. Everybody should be coming to work with their sales plan. And those two things will tie together beautifully.
That's what they should look like. But a lot of times you add extra efficiency things and productivity actually starts to plateau. Like there comes a diminishing return for a lot of this stuff, or dips because it becomes too like the efficiency of getting data becomes too cumbersome, like, or maybe the volume is becoming too much. Anyway,
I agree.
Or you go, you try and go too efficient and go for speed, and then you automate too much, and that becomes less.
That's a better way to say it, Scott.
Yeah. So Chris, your original answer to this question, there was a lot in there. So I want to unpack that a little bit. And I think you broke it down into like 3 real challenges. And we talked about some of these earlier. Too much time doing discovery internally. You don't have the right data. You got to unpack these things with your sales manager. Number 2, was latency of execution. So your data is moving too slow, the flow of information. And by the time it gets from point A to point B, it might be outdated and therefore useless. And then the one I wanted to dive into was how can we align incentives, right? So incentives clearly aren't aligned. If I'm rep A and I'm hitting my quota and I'm a top performer and my CRM data is trash, but I'm getting paraded around the office like a hero because I'm hitting my number, yet our marketing team can't make informed decisions on new campaigns. We can't target some of the accounts, and you're messing up the rest of the organization. How can we, like as a thought experiment, how could we better align incentives for complete data? Do we pay reps to do it, or how does it work?
I don't think so. It's part of it is how you're wired, right? Like you look at some of the people in the sales org that are incredibly good at keeping data hygiene at peak performance. Sales solutions engineers, really, really good. I jokingly call them the accountants of sales. They're very much wired to be technical, and they want to have everything sort of documented in the right spots. When you're talking about a salesperson that you're paying to be creative and imaginative, that maybe doesn't have those skills around maintenance, et cetera, I don't think any amount of incentive is going to, or like a monetary incentive is going to change that behavior. And frankly, I don't think you want that either. Like if you get to 100% of all fields filled in with Salesforce, I'm going to give you a $500 bonus or whatever it is. What I think is probably more effective in terms of driving a behavioral shift is something that I said earlier, which is if you give me the information, I will reciprocate with value coming back to you. Tell them what you're doing with the data. It is so basic. It is so easy, and it is so obvious. And yet most organizations don't. Again, let's go back to the medic example. I put in all of this information in there. If your manager isn't using that as a coaching vehicle to help you navigate the deal, then there is a misalignment of what you're asking for and what you're giving back. If you put in a competitor into the competitor field in the CRM and nothing happens, guess what's going to happen to that data entry point over time? It will stop being filled in because nobody sees the value. You have to create this reciprocal relationship between the data and the individual. It's called data in motion in our world. So if you're putting data in motion, and I'll give you the parallel. Everybody talks about data being the new oil, and I fundamentally disagree with that. So what happens is we take the data and we pour it into a jerry can and we leave it sitting on the side of the road. And we hope that somebody's going to pick that jerry can up and pour it into something else and do something with it at some point in time. You know what data is? It's the oil that's already in the engine that's making the engine work. There's where the value is. It's data in motion. It's actually making something explosive happen with that information, as opposed to, again, another metaphor here, the digital filing cabinet that we house everything in, and we just hope that somebody's going to open a drawer one day and find the thing that they need and make some brilliant decision based on it. It doesn't happen like that.
Right. So you can align the incentives by simply telling them, hey, if you fill out your competitor field, and then if we happen to win that deal, that's going to inform our marketing team that, hey, that is going to fit our ICP. Then we're going to in turn be able to target more companies that look like that with our ABM strategy, and you're going to get more inbound leads from that. And here's how.
And I think that's partly right, but I think that it goes a little bit further than that, because I still think that model is reactive, and we need to get to the point where our data is making us preemptive, right? So as people are asking you, hey, do you guys do this? Do you do that? Do you do this? Do you do that? They're probably asking those questions because they've been looking at something else. You should be able to preemptively strike back and say, hey, it sounds like you're talking about competitor X, or it sounds like you're talking about problem Y. Here's how we can deal with that, right? And use the data. Again, weaponize your data to be able to respond with information that preemptively responds to the buyer as opposed to waiting until it's way too late. There's no point in, I mean, except for the next deal or the five deals that are forthcoming, no point in updating the competitive field for something you've already lost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Other than to inform your future path of like what product marketing needs to do to make you better for the next deal. That deal that you lost really hurts because you put a lot of time and effort into it.
Yeah.
Nobody likes
it. Totally. Yeah. I like that. And Jake, any thoughts here before we got a ton of questions? So I do want to get to
I love the Q&A. The thing that I'll maybe like, Scott, I think something you said that's important to delineate. Reps, if the messaging to the reps is, yeah, and if you enter the data, then we'll target better, etc. Timmy Frontlines, he's not hearing that, man. He's like, how's that going to affect me? I think if you got to help that mythical rep understand, for you, Timmy, this is exactly what you're going to do with the data, and this is how it's going to help you to do quota, not the company. People don't get it. That's not how people are motivated, and definitely not with incentives. 100% no. You're going to create all kinds of perverse incentives. There's zero chance that it's going to work. It's called like the Cobra effect. It's like there's a town in India that like charged for dead cobras, and so people started Cobra farms so they could do it. Like you're just going to have Cobra farms pop up all over where people are just going to enter in data. Yeah. So I think you've got to make it more micro to them. Let me talk to you. That's one persona type that needs that. The other is like, look, if you have lone wolf reps, as long as they're getting you the core, move on. Move on. Like you're not going to get everyone this perfect little robot. Like dude, if 85% as long as 100% of people are giving you this data and 85 or 90% are giving you this, like great. Like don't spend as much anguish as we have talking about the lone wolf type person, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, I want to go and Jake, I'll point this one back at you because you have such a great lens on kind of the whole sales tech landscape, and this is going at data, but from pouring in more what we're pouring into our funnel, not what we're extracting from our reps. What is the best resource to find contact info with phone numbers and emails? Do you recommend Zoom Info? What are like your go-tos for
Zoom Info is now Discover. Yeah. So yes, I recommend Discover. I mean, our tech stack, someone had asked this, is Discover.org, and they're going to be integrating Zoom Info into the back end. So you're going to get it. It's going to be epic. I mean, they've just been like, Discover.org is now, I feel like, has got the best stuff. And they've got, Henry, that he's built an amazing, kind of quality check with manual, with humans, right? So it's not just, machine scraping. And then, the other one that we use too is Lead Genius. Whenever we need custom lists, they're really good at is they have a team of people that, like, let's say we know a leading indicator. And again, this goes back to the data. If you don't know this, then you won't, you don't have predictive algorithms running. Like, let's say that if a VP is new to their job in the first 5 months, then they have a 4x propensity to buy. I can go and ask them to go scrape and go do that. So those are kind of our go-tos. I think Discover.org has really just cornered the market right now. There's some other like smaller, like Lead IQ and things like that. But I think those are that's how we look at it. Discover.org is our go-to. If they need kind of custom data, then we'll use some hybrid of that in Lead Genius.
Yeah. Does Lead Genius, if you give them, because I get asked this question all the time about, hey, I go after insurance brokers or real estate agents or something like that. Info isn't in Discover.org. Do they have access to that? Will they go and build that kind of data too, or like doctors or dentists?
Yeah, they'll do if they have it. There's certain. I mean, I think that's I don't know like their extent. We haven't worked on that before, but they can go pretty deep. Like we've given them some pretty weird criteria before.
Cool. Good to know.
We use Zoom Info.
Zoom Info. Yeah. Nice. Well, I think that naturally takes us to another question. Is what is the tech stack currently at Dooley, and then we'll get to scale.
This is very self-serving. I don't know if I want to answer this first. Maybe Jake, you should go first.
No, I don't know if I want to answer it either. No, I mean, like, look, there's obviously, we talked about the data space. I think predictive is still early, but I think predictive is going to be core to how you do account planning, how you do account targeting. You know, if you look at what like EverString is doing, I'm really big on lean data right now for bigger teams. Like the simplicity of what you can do with lean data to get the right leads, the right people at the right time, to me is really differentiating. And then obviously, look, the sales engagement space is table stakes. I think every single sales development team, every single sales team, and every single account management team should have a sales engagement platform. Like, the use cases are there. It's like running your marketing team without a marketing automation platform that you can do all this if then and that's like, and it's not about automating it. I know it's like the dirtiest word. I'm not even talking about that. It's workflow management. And so I feel like as this space continues to grow, sales leaders will start to wake up that all sales engagement tools are a workflow. They're containers of activities and things that can happen. And I can put in whatever I want into those containers, which means that there's a very strong reason why all business units should be using them. And then I think, look, there's some interesting stuff around data and analytics. Like, I think Collective Eye is doing something different where they're actually aggregating. They're not just doing their own predictive AI. They're actually aggregating data from other people's CRM anonymously to then better improve the forecast. I think that's smart. Insight Squared, People.ai, there's a few, but I think those are kind of like the core elements. Clean data in, sales engagement, predictive on the front end, predictive like from a forecasting standpoint, just to give you more insights that the human brain just isn't going to pick up on these 7 variables. Yeah. That and Sales Nav. I think Sales Nav over the last year or 2 years has made some really massive strides. Some of the things you can do around, especially if you use partners, they have a team link that you can send and it'll open up the salespeople to partners. So Sales Nav, I think, would be my only other thing I'd add from like a data and engagement standpoint.
Yeah.
And Dooley, obviously. And Dooley. I didn't want to be like shameless plug. We use Dooley.
Thank you. High five. So I'll say our tech stack is maybe I'll talk about how we prioritized our tech stack. That might be a better way to think about it. First thing you're going to need in your tech stack is your filing cabinet, right? So pick your flavor of CRM. Obviously, Salesforce is the big kahuna right now, and there are lots of other ones. It depends on the size of your business that in terms of what you're going to pick. I hate to say this, but they're all pretty much the same in terms of how a rep is going to use it. Now, they might have better analytics or better integrations and things like that, but they're all pretty much the same. So that's the first thing you're going to get. Then you need to figure out your top of funnel. Where am I going to get my leads from? And so that's when you're probably going to look at a Sales Nav, which I will say this, we use it. We begrudgingly use it. I'm not a fan of their user experience at all, but I do like the results that you can get out of Sales Nav. And we also use ZoomInfo as a way of drawing in contact information and things like that. And of course, there's lots of other things you can use in sort of generating your top of funnel. Those are the ones that we primarily use. Then you need to execute on your top of funnel because you need to get stuff into your funnel and deep into your funnel. So that's when we'll use outreach. And we use outreach to optimize our efficiency in terms of that sequence of trying to get somebody into a live meeting and then further down into the funnel. And, further down into the funnel, it gets used for different purposes, I believe, because it's harder to sequence a deal once it's live and you're in a choose your own adventure situation. So that sort of covers off on top of funnel, then bottom of funnel or middle of funnel. We'll start to look at things like call recording. We use Zoom and we use our platform. And we'll look at ways of managing our opportunities. And obviously we use Dooley. I think that goes without saying for our playbook and our sales execution. And it's purpose driven for it. And from an analytics perspective, I really like what Clary and Insight Squared are doing. I will say this, and there was a question actually in the open questions around Insight Squared, so maybe this is a way of dovetailing it in. I believe that Clary and Insight Squared do a really good job of analyzing things that are numeric and things that are binary, right? So how long has it been in the funnel? How big is the deal? How many contacts have you had with that individual? And so on and so on and so on. So it's doing a really good job of measuring things that are easily measurable. What I think that all of those platforms do a really poor job of is measuring who, what, when, where, why, and how those influence your forecast. It's really, really hard to do, and I don't think anybody's nailed it yet, but it'll come. I think that's an area where we can improve forecasting accuracy with even those platforms.
Jake,
so that's us.
Yeah, makes sense. And I love both your stacks, and I like your viewpoints on it. I would agree. Jake, any further thoughts on tools like Insight Squared? We've got Brian asked a question based on your point earlier about the data also being for reps. Do you think tools like Insight Squared provide enough data?
Insight Squared is a good analysis tool for every 3 months, 2 or 3 months. It's not built to help you to optimize in the day to day. But I think it's an amazing, we use it for a long time from an analysis standpoint to understand, hey, what is my individual sales cycle? Where do my individual deals get stuck? But again, you don't need to look at it every day. It's a really great tool as a rep to be able to go in and look at your trends. Chris talked about his trend as a seller, and you'll see these kind of weird lines about sales cycles and where deals get stuck and how unique those are. In the macro, it looks like this beautiful line, but in the micro and even teams are stronger. So I feel like it's a really good quarterly assessment tool for frontline people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I look at it as a rudder to make really big turns that are going to change the direction for the next quarter, as opposed to the thing that's going to get you through the hairpin on your next deal.
Right. So not necessarily the best at the rep level.
Well, again, think about how most software is bought right now. It's bought as an enterprise solution. It's bought from the top down. Yeah. More and more and more, you're seeing solutions that are being brought in from the user up. Why? Because the user is the start point of every piece of data, every piece of information that percolates through the organization. And they want a system that works the way that they work, not the way that the business needs, or not based on the needs of the business, based on the needs of the individual. So you're going to see a paradigm shift in technology big time.
Yeah, and a small company that did that very well is actually IPOing today, Slack, which went from the user first kind of a approach, right? I think they're IPOs today, right? It's going to be crazy to see how that plays out.
If it's not today, it's imminent. And, hats off a company that started in our neck of the woods in Vancouver.
You don't get enough credit for that.
Yeah, and their model was really genius. They went in through users. They started with trying to get product managers on board that were thought leaders in the space, and realizing that those people were like the mule that would bring it around the organization. And it just went crazy viral.
Yeah. Okay. I love this question. It's a little off topic, so bear with me. But I love it because I'm a big fan of outbound sales and outbound sales process. So this is from Anonymous. I just joined a company that hasn't done any outbound sales. They haven't invested in marketing just yet. What would your advice be to building an outbound sales process to bring in revenue? They are a pro-serve business.
Yeah, that last piece is critical. So it's all partnerships, my friend. I mean, look, we've scaled from zero to multi-million-dollar business, and I can tell you a vast majority of our business is partnerships, and that's technology partnerships like outreach, and we've got some exciting things in the works too. And it's also other services partners, recruitment firms, agencies, sales training companies. So if I was starting outbound for a professional services company, I would target the complementary ecosystem. Like for us, it's like outsourced CFOs, like all these people that kind of work with different companies like we do. I would really I would focus there versus direct, because professional services, you either have that need at that exact time for whatever your service is, or you don't. And so I think there's ways that you can make direct work, but partnerships and kind of referral partnerships are how this really works. Now you have to activate those like you would in outbound. So for us, we nurture the reps at your company, right, Scott? We're sending we're sequences and we're pounding them with emails to remember us, but it's all partners for us.
Yeah, great point. Chris, anything to add there on building an outbound model for ProServe?
It's going to be largely relationship based. I'll say that, and I think I just 100% agree with Jake on it.
Yeah, I would third that. All right, here's another good question from Michael. Michael's got some good ones. What should be a timeline for evaluating effectiveness? It goes back to our effectiveness conversation. Weekly success meetings, monthly, quarterly. How do you kind of close that loop on deciding whether your reps are being effective?
Sales cycle and deal size. Like if it's, like if you're getting more at bats, then you're going to be able to judge effectiveness on a monthly basis. If you're, if it's longer, then it's quarterly. For your average, let's say it's a $25,000 deal, or 25 to 50,000 with like a 45-day sales cycle, and probably quarterly is probably the right number for you. 60 days quarterly to go back and reflect, but that's max.
I'd add to that it really depends on what you're trying to measure within effectiveness. The more granular you want to get, the more you can probably be closer to the moment. The more blue sky you want to get, the longer out that time horizon has to be, so that you can measure more variables relative to what you're looking at.
Interesting points there. I like it. And all right, let's do one more question, because then I got to run and catch this flight. This is from Juliana. Juliana, thank you for the question. And we talked about this a little bit, but let's hit this home. What tools do you use for your day-to-day analytics? Chris, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think we've already kind of covered off on this. We create reports on product consumption and usage for it. So I look after the whole business, right? So I can talk to things that are like post-sale as well, like Amplitude. We look at Amplitude quite heavily. We look at Intercom. We look at Full Story, and those are sort of post-sale or post-user experience with our product. For pipeline measurement and pipeline monitoring, we still largely use Salesforce, and that's sort of based on our size of our business. So we build reports and dashboards in Salesforce that will help us understand everything from, things like the devil in the details of how many emails and how many phone calls are you making, through to the number of demos booked, where things are in the pipeline, et cetera, how long they've been in different stages, and whatnot. And you can do that in Salesforce. It takes time to build it right, but you're not going to get the predictive component unless you Einstein it up. And even with Einstein it up, you could get what you could get out, like an Insight Squared or a Clary or other.
Cool. Jake, thoughts there? Or is that
we use Salesforce for some of our basic stuff, and then we just got started actually literally this week with Collective Eye, who I mentioned before, who I really feel has a strong middle funnel tool. I know the guys at people.ai, and I know they're doing some really interesting things and getting a lot of love from a lot of people. And then, Insight Square, we use that tool for a long time. It's a really, really good tool too. So, and then obviously, look, once you get a little bit larger, then you need to start to look at, the Domos, the Tableaus, the Grows, like the more data visualization, so you can just do more interesting stuff and out of the box, like what someone tells you should do. So, Looker, right? Looker just got acquired for some $2 billion or something like that. So
yeah, and Tableau for 15.8, I believe it was the other day from Salesforce. So
because people want to customize, once you get to a certain stage, out of the box just becomes more difficult to purchase, right? And even like Microsoft's Dynamics, their Power BI tool actually has turned out to be a pretty strong, if you're on Dynamics, for example, pretty strong platform. So
yeah. And that was a crazy acquisition, the Salesforce Tableau. They took a lot of heat for how much they paid for that one. Lots of heat, but they've got plans. All right. So as we wrap up, gentlemen, thank you so much for spending the time. But I want to wrap up with this question. If people walk away with one or two things from this discussion we've had today, what would those be? And Jake, let's start with you.
All right, I'll start. I'll go back to what I've echoed a few times. Data is not about your leadership team. It is about you as an individual, right? And whether you're a rep, a manager, a VP, or whoever, data is about you and your own performance. And the better that you are able to track your own performance as a rep, a manager, a VP, the more successful you will be in the long term. You won't be making decisions based on gut about who you are and what you're good at. So get this out of your head that the reason this data stuff exists is for other people. Start to find the ways that it's applicable to you. And that is, if you take anything away, that's the thing I want you to take away is you need to start tracking your own data.
Yeah, and that's a great point on career enhancement. I'll take it from the other side, which is from the management side. There's a diminishing return on data. So if you're asking for people to give you the moon, know that it's coming at the expense of something else. I break it down into Newton's 3 laws as the other takeaway for me, which is body in motion stays in motion, body at rest stays at rest. If your data is sitting in a silo, it's not doing you any good. You have to put your data in motion. That's one part. And the other part of Newton's 3 laws, or the other parts, are acceleration is directly related to the forces applied to an object. So if you want to accelerate deals, you need to apply more force to your data. You need to put your data even more in motion than you think you do. And then the other one is, of course, is action and reaction. So for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. If you are asking a rep to put data into a system, you need to react with something back. So again, that's kind of a reinforcement of the things that I said before. So fix your supply chain of information so that it's fluid and that it's reciprocal. And if you do those things, you'll be far better off than you are today.
Those are great takeaways. Well, Jake, Chris, thank you so much for hanging out. I know I thoroughly enjoyed that, and based on the engagement we had all the way throughout, the community did as well. So thank you both.